voluntarily submitted himself to be lower than the angels. You need the light, Jason.
Oh, wait, I got the PowerPoint.
Okay, okay.
771.
771 be the song after the invitation. So I get hooked up here. I was listening to somebody the other day. They're talking about aging, and they use the acronym SOS, not Save Our Ship, but they said it was slower, older, smarter. I thought that was sort of catchy, and I wrote that down. Thought that's something we could talk briefly about tonight, just for a couple of minutes. I think that's on here. We were talking about slower, and I just picked some different verses that I found to sort of illustrate these points. But Proverbs 23:22 says, "Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old." It's always seemed to me that as people get older, especially those in the public life, that for some reason they don't want to be, people don't want to see them anymore. I know it happened to Dick Clark, if you can remember back to when he was really popular, and he had a stroke and was not on TV for a while. Then he came back before he passed away, and he really couldn't talk. He had that stroke affected his speech, and people, especially online, complained. They didn't, why is he on there? Why is he a part of this show? They just didn't want to see him for some reason. And if you watch college football, they did the same thing to Lee Corso, who was on College Game Day on Saturday mornings. He just retired. He's 90 years old. He did his final broadcast in the fall, and he had also had a stroke a few years back that affected his speech. And people online would say, why do they keep putting him out there when he's obviously not in good health? Well, he wanted to be out there, and he still had something to contribute. So I think people shouldn't turn their backs on people just because they get older. And we see that a lot with our politicians too. We start to say, well, so-and-so shouldn't be up there because they're a certain age. They've done it to people of both parties. They've done it to Joe Biden. They did it to Mitch McConnell. They've done it to multiple people. And, when do we, I think we don't need to sit there and just say because somebody has reached a certain age that they're not capable anymore. And that can be the case. But I think sometimes people just say it to say it. They just don't want to be reminded that they're going to get old one day and they're going to go through these things. And we want to be discarded when we reach a certain age if we feel like we still have something left to give. Psalm 71:9 says, "Do not cast me off in the time of old age. Do not forsake me when my strength fails." I think I've told the story up here before. My father, when he retired from his job, he was a parts manager for years at different car dealerships in Nashville, and he lasted 6 months before he had to go back to work part-time. He could not sit at home anymore. He could not mow the yard enough times to make it worth his while to be around the house. So he delivered semi-truck transmissions on flatbeds until he was 86, part-time, 3 days a week. And he would drive a transmission to Chattanooga or Huntsville or Louisville. Finally, we had to say, maybe we should stop this. It was, it seemed to me it was getting kind of dangerous, especially with the way traffic is. But he didn't want to sit at home. And the week before he passed away, we went and visited a friend of mine's mother. And he was telling her at that point, when he was 90, that he was bored. He felt like he had no use anymore, that he wished he could go back to work. He really did not want to slow down. So we don't need to force people to slow down when they don't want to. It reminds me of the fact that when you're older, you still have a purpose. And it's something we need to think about. In Psalm 71:18, it reads, "Now also when I'm old and gray-headed, O God, do not forsake me till I declare your strength to this generation, your power to everyone who is to come." At the very least, we can still share the word. We can share the truth. We can show up at church and inspire others to do the same thing. We can still do the things that should be done as we continue this journey. through this life. In Titus 2, starting in verse 1, it says, "But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith and love and patience. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given much to wine, teachers of good things. They admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed." So older people are an example. It should be treated as an example. I think as we see more and more, older people are being sort of pushed aside. It's youth is what sells. Youth is what people want to see. And if you don't believe that, you should try going and interviewing for jobs with just the amount of gray hair I have. It was very hard to get another job after my job ended, and had a lot of interviews and a lot of prospects, and sent out a lot of resumes. And I think when they see that you've got decades of experience, they're like, well, I think we'd rather have somebody younger that we can shape into whatever we want to be. We don't want you coming in here with ideas or preconceived thoughts. So the respect for people who are aging is just seems to be fading, unfortunately. And a lot of people don't realize that when you're older, you're typically smarter. And Job 12:12 says, "Wisdom is with aged men, and with lengths of days understanding." We can put the experience we have to really good use. Psalm 92, starting in verse 12, says, "The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall still bear fruit in old age. They shall be fresh and flourishing." I think when we're Christians, we've learned more with age, and as we get further along in life, I think I don't know saying that we get better at it, but I think we certainly know a lot more about what not to do. And I think we learn a lot more about what happens if we do something we shouldn't do. That's wisdom as we age in life and things are just not worth risking. So there's an understanding and an intelligence that comes with age and experience that we need to celebrate, more than we need to push it aside and ignore it. And finally, the final verse I wanted to share was for 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. And I think I used this not long ago talking about another topic. But it says, "Therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. With our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working with us or for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal." So we're marching to that better place as we go through life. And I've talked about before, my great grandmother, she lived to be 96 and she passed away in 1993. And at some points in life, I think, that's been a long time since I've been able to see my great grandmothers. I've been able to speak to her since I've been able to be around her, but we're all getting closer to that place that hopefully she will also be. We're marching forward in age and we're marching closer to that time where we'll be hopefully in that real home that we're all looking for, not this temporary home. So, that's another thing I think to celebrate with aging. And certainly there's difficulties with aging, aches and pains and illnesses and everything else. And I think our faith can guide us and lead us through that if we decide to stay faithful. And, it's unfortunate. We see people, I think also unfortunately, some people, when they get older, they turn around and leave the faith for some reason. They put all that time in it and they seem to be there learning about it and seem to be doing the right thing. And then they walk away at the end. And that's a real shame. It's really difficult when you lose people like that, when they're getting closer to that judgment. Well, I thought these were a few decent ideas to talk about tonight. There's a lot to think about with aging. It's going to happen to all of us. It's hopefully, and we don't know how many years we have here, but If we're lucky, we will experience it and we will thrive through it, hopefully, and contribute during it. If you're subject to the invitation tonight, if you have need of the prayers of the church or anything else we can do, please come forward while we stand and sing this final song.